We've got a major Boston Celtics update for you guys, as Xavier Tillman's role has finally been explained, as the newest Celtic is going to be an impactful piece for this roster. We also will dive in looking at a possibility of a Blake Griffin reunion in Boston, as Payton, Pritchard, and Derrick White tease that on a podcast. And we'll also be diving in looking at Joe Mazzula saying that he mimics his coaching style off of a famous soccer coach. All of that and more on this episode of Celtics Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz. Without further ado, we're going to dive into all of this information. Make sure to grab a snack, as it is going to be a jam-packed video. But let's get started and let's dive in looking at the first topic, which is Joe Mazzula explaining his coaching style. Now, personally, I did not know this until I read this article this morning, but Jared Weiss from The Athletic and from CLNS Media, who does a perfect job of covering the Boston Celtics, had an article written today about how Joe Mazzula kind of explaining his coaching style and who he mimics it off of, and it was very, very cool to find this out. If we want to dive in, we can find out that Joe Mazzula loved soccer growing up in Rhode Island, and the free-flowing run of play nature of the formation made it a canvas to paint sporting creativity. Though he pursued basketball, soccer never left him, and when he got to West Virginia for college, he knew he was far from the most talented basketball player in the Big East, but he was able to translate the footwork, conditioning, and the reach to the court, which helped him carry his team to a Final Four. More than a decade later, he worked his way to the Celtics bench, first as an assistant coach, and now he has his own ideas for how to run a club, but he figured he would be a few years before he was the one holding the clipboard. We also find out from Joe Mazzula that this is what the game of basketball is about to me, and what counterattacking is in soccer is about, Mazzulla told The Athletic. So I study a lot of Man City. I study Pep a lot, and I think he's the best coach at any level, in any sport, and it's had a huge influence on himself. So this is really cool to see, as Joe Mazzula kind of explains how soccer and basketball are alike in the article, and kind of details how he styles his coaching style, kind of similar to Pep in Man City. And as if you do not know, Pep is a very successful Man City soccer head coach. That is very, very cool. A little bit of information as well, like the article mentioned. Joe Mazzula loved soccer growing up, so that is very cool to see that he's kind of tapping into some of his roots and kind of ingratiating that into a new style of coaching, which is desperately something new, but also fun to see with the Celtics as well. We want to keep diving into this article. Mazzula also says everybody tries to break up basketball into offense and defense, but it's one game. Your transition defense sucks. Everybody talks about your transition defense, but it's your spacing and your decision making and your shot selection. Then it's your transition defense. I think where basketball and soccer are the same, is the transition is happening so fast. You can be on offense, and 2 seconds later, you can be on defense. So the game is constantly changing. He also had to say a little bit more, diving in, saying soccer and basketball, when I watch it, it's kind of the same sport from the tactical standpoint of how do you create an advantage, Mazzulla said. How do you create 2-on-1s? How do you recognize weaknesses in the defense? And how do you take advantage of all of angles? For Al Horford, this wasn't an entirely novel concept, as he's a Premier League fan as well, but he's been watching soccer long before the rest of his teammates, and in his prime, Horford ran the offense from the perimeter. He was playing on some teams with more distinct roles along the lineup, and this no Mazzula ball removed those silos between roles on each of the end of the floor. Even myself, I'm learning from him, just he is making an understand of how it is to work and take care of those advantages, and that's what he calls them, Horford told The Athletic. He wants us to see and execute and really not just be robots out there, whatever the game is dictating us to do, which I really like to see. Joe Mazzula is, bringing this new style Mazzula ball, which, fans could say they like or fans say they don't like, but having that new type of style of this game is fantastic for these players, and it gives them this new way of, learning the game of basketball and implementing it into their offense and defense. I really like this style that Joe Mazzula is taking down, and I think that it is the smart tactical way, because the Celtics are obviously playing great. They're obviously the top team in the Eastern Conference, the best team in the NBA, one of the top 5 in both offensive and defensive metrics in the whole NBA. So you've got to love to see those things and show that Joe Mazzula is doing a lot with this team. Obviously, there's a lot more that dives in this article. If you guys are more interested in the article, make sure to check it out on Twitter or from Jared Weiss, as it is a fantastic article diving in about all things around Joe Mazzula. Let's keep talking and keep diving in on some more topics here today, which we'll be talking about Xavier Tillman possibly shining soon. And Xavier Tillman's role has finally been explained for all the Boston Celtics fans. And if you guys do not know, he has had 2 games since he's been on the roster since off the injury report. He played in the first game versus the Bulls, and the last game versus the New York Knicks, he unfortunately did not get any run. But we could see some changes to that, as Xavier Tillman's role has finally been kind of told to us by Al Horford. So Al Horford said in this article from Suachi Terada. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but he does a great job covering for Mass Live. But he says that it's been good to have X around, Horford said. I'm sure he's going to getting his opportunities here sooner than later, but just somebody that you can tell he's very eager to learn. Right away, he's been picking my brain a lot, asking a lot of questions, and really trying to figure things out off the court and on the court. And when you have that kind of mindset, I feel like it's going to be very beneficial. And I totally agree. We already have broken down how Xavier Tillman has said he's one of those stay-ready guys. A guy for the Celtics, if you do not know, is a guy that does not really play that much, but when his number's called or if there's an injury and he has to step up for the Celtics, he is going to be ready to go and implicate that matchup impactfully for himself. And I think that Xavier Tillman is going to do that for the Boston Celtics. Like Al Horford said, unfortunately, we did not see him last time versus the New York Knicks, but him talking to Al Horford and getting this connection budding and brewing is what I want to see. I think he's kind of a younger version of Al Horford, a mix of a 4 and 5, a guy who, if he develops his offensive game and gets that three-pointer back to what it was like his rookie year, I think he could be a decent three-point shooter for the Celtics, and his defense is phenomenal. If Al Horford could teach him that stretchability on that offensive side, I think we have another prototype of Al Horford in the future for the Boston Celtics with Xavier Tillman. But let's keep diving in and looking what Al Horford had to say. Because Al Horford said because he's the kind of guy that wants to get better, he wants to have an impact, and he has that ability to have an impact on our group. The Celtics brought in Tillman as another big option alongside Luke Kornet, and Tillman brings in a different game, especially on the defensive end, giving the Celtics another option in the playoffs if they call his number. But the Celtics employ a sophisticated defensive scheme for big men, so it's going to take some time to learn all these nuances. That's where guys like Horford come in, and Tillman gets more used to his surroundings, which again, as a Celtics fan, you want to see and you want to hear because you want your players to be getting recognized and to be showing the young guys how to work in these roles. The veteran is supposed to do that, and Al Horford taking this role is fantastic. Al Horford also said in this article that he does expect Tillman to get more playing time throughout the season, and we will be seeing Tillman more in this year. So I think next game versus the Philadelphia 76ers, we already saw Jordan Walsh come up. They don't have Joel Embiid. We could possibly see another possible blowout at home. Could we see some more Xavier and Tillman minutes? Or maybe an experiment with Xavier Tillman with a team that doesn't have a great front court right now with Embiid going down. Could this be an option for the Celtics to utilize Tillman? I desperately think so. In my personal opinion, I think Xavier Tillman's going to start to see an increase in his minutes once he starts playing some defense better and hitting some of his shots. And I think we'll get to see him play 5 to 10 minutes in some sporadic nights. And then if he actually earns his role, we'll see 10 to 12 minutes come out of Tillman. But like I mentioned, if you want to talk about Tillman and keep diving in, he said it's very interesting, Tillman said, joining a new team. You come in there and you don't want to shake the tree. You want to figure out how you can help the team do what they've been doing as far as winning and stuff like that. For me, when I got here, my goal was just to mainly watch for a little while, just to see how everybody interacts, what's the vibe, and see what I can make my impact. And he's still learning too. And like I mentioned, what he's doing is the smart thing. Talking to Al Horford, getting that veteran experience, learning from the guys that he shares similar play styles to is what's going to help him grow and improve, especially as a shooter. And if we want to look at Noah Dalzell's tweet, this was from Celtics practice today, where Xavier Tillman was sinking three-pointers. And one of the main gripes about Xavier Tillman was his offensive game and being able to do that. So the fact that he's already working on his offensive game, working on those three-pointers, trying to perfect that, you could already know that Al Horford's a little bit in his ear, or the Celtics want him, or he himself feels, I need to get better at this to have an impact on this roster, which as a fan you love to see. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section about Xavier Tillman. What are your guys' thoughts on him? And are you ready to see him make a huge impact for this team? Because I think he's going to crack the playoff rotation. But last but not least, let's dive into the last topic at hand today in this video, which is a possible Blake Griffin reunion back in Boston. So if you guys missed it, there was a podcast release from the Barstool Sports organization from Pardon My Take, which has Big Cat and PFT on it, and they had Derrick White and Payton Pritchard on their podcast when they were in Chicago playing against the Chicago Bulls. And it released this morning, and I listened to it. I thought it was a pretty good podcast. Payton Pritchard and Derrick White were taking some jokes. It's a very non-serious podcast. It's very funny, so it was just kind of cracking jokes in here and there, but there was some talk, and at the end of the podcast, there was this clip where Big Cat called Blake Griffin as they're very close, and they had this little discussion here where we have a little bit of a snippet from Legion Hoops saying that Derrick White and Payton Pritchard say Celtics players have been begging Blake Griffin to come back to the roster. And Blake Griffin, when asked about it, says, "We talk quite a bit, and I'm just enjoying my life right now." So we want to dive in, kind of explaining that more. Blake Griffin, they asked Derrick White and Payton Pritchard what they thought of Blake Griffin. They said that they want him back. They want him back on this team. They think he could be that guy for the 15th roster. Even as a vet, they just really, really like him. Payton Pritchard even said that he texted Blake Griffin a week or two ago asking him if he wanted to come back already. So it has been in the works behind the scenes. When they called Blake Griffin, they had him on FaceTime. They had a little bit of an interaction where Blake Griffin basically said that he thinks the Celtics can win and he would love to come back, basically wants to come back, but ultimately, he doesn't know if he physically can. I think it's necessarily more of just a mindset thing for him. I think if he wanted to win a ring, he would want to win a ring being an actual contributing piece. I don't think he wants to be at the end of the bench. And Joe Mazzula also said at practice today that a little bit of family issues and with him wanting to deal with family has led him not to be on this team. But ultimately, the deadline is March 1st to get this roster filled. So the Celtics could go after a guy in Blake Griffin, bring him back as a vet guy. If they were interested in Isaiah Thomas, they could be interested in a guy who's recently played with their roster and could be, some front court help as well. I know that Blake Griffin, is probably going to be the least valuable guy that is going to be in the front court, but he's still got that character, he's still got that charisma, he's got that veteran energy, he's got that vet presence, and clearly he is liked by the entire roster if players are begging him for him to come back. So the fans want him, the players want him, the front office wants him. It's ultimately up to Blake, and he'll make that decision. We'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think the Celtics will do with that 15th roster spot. Because, as Brad Stevens said, he wants to be patient with it. But as we all know, there have been a bunch of rumors with certain players. Obviously now Blake Griffin, possibly an Isaiah Thomas reunion, possibly an Otto Porter Jr. buyout, or if there are any other veterans. I know people said in the comments maybe a Cedi Osman and a Pokashevsky buyout. That's a possibility for the Celtics to go. Or they could realistically do what they want to do right and bring up Neemias Queta as that 15 guy. There's so many possibilities, and we're just getting closer and closer to the deadline, which is March 1st, so we'll have to wait and see. But let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions down below. What would you guys like to see the Boston Celtics do, and how excited are you guys for Xavier Tillman to be shining on this squad? Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode here of Celtics Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.